everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Samantha, and I am in client services here at the Retirement Group. I am going to be moderating this webinar this afternoon for you. So you'll see me throw some very valuable links into the chat throughout the presentation. They will guide you to our LinkedIn, where you can view a full schedule of upcoming ExxonMobil focused webinars, as well as a link to the Education Center, where you can view all of our past recordings, as well as a link to book an appointment with an advisor after this presentation. Today, we're going to be talking about ExxonMobil 401k. If you're concerned about whether or not your 401k can withstand current market conditions, you're in the right place today. Our ExxonMobil focused advisor, Tyson Mavar, is going to be speaking to you about mistakes to avoid and how to potentially insulate your 401k from effects of inflation. Before I bring Tyson on, I would just like to remind you to keep in mind that although we have extensive knowledge of ExxonMobil's retirement plan, we are not affiliated nor endorsed whatsoever by ExxonMobil. The Retirement Group is a completely independent group of financial advisors. And after Tyson's presentation, I'll be coming back on to ask him any of the questions you may have entered into the Q&A box. We really love when you guys engage with us and ask questions, so please feel free to do that. It's 100% anonymous, and I'll try to make sure that Tyson answers as many as time permits. And with that, I'm just going to introduce you now to our speaker today, Tyson Mavar. Hi, Tyson.
Hi, Sam. Thank you, folks, for joining us today. My name is Tyson Mavar. I'm one of the ExxonMobil Focus Advisors for the Retirement Group here in Texas. And on today's webinar, we wanted to cover some of the important and big changes that have happened to retirees as far as the tax code goes that affects retirement accounts. We're going to talk about the recent changes that will likely affect your retirement plan, some beneficial, some not so much. And we're also going to talk about some changes specific to the ExxonMobil benefits, both on the pension and 401k today. For those of you who aren't as familiar with our company, the Retirement Group is an independent financial consulting firm that specializes in helping corporate employees plan for and transition into retirement. We actually manage retirement assets for retired ExxonMobil employees, as well as employees of a handful of other companies around the country. And whether or not you decide to become a client of ours, we have a whole host of complimentary service we strongly encourage you to take advantage of as you approach your transition from ExxonMobil, to ensure that you haven't overlooked any of the important decisions that you'll have as you lead up to your transition from the company, with regards to taxes, with regards to your pension options, health insurance and expenses in retirement, 401k and your investment strategy in retirement, estate planning. We'll talk a little bit about that today. Very important to many of our clients at the Retirement Group. And all this is complimentary. We hope that you find value in these webinars and in the exercises if we get to meet one-on-one. Whether or not you decide to become a client, we just hope that you have a good enough experience in talking to us to help us grow our business by recommending some of your coworkers also talk to us. We also have a LinkedIn page I encourage everybody to follow if you're not doing so already, where we will publish this webinar as well as many others on many different topics. And the QR code on this slide, if you take a picture of it, will take you to our LinkedIn page, where you can keep up to speed with any of the changes happening with both the ExxonMobil benefits and what we'll be talking about today, tax rules that affect retirement accounts. Now, on today's agenda, we have a lot to cover because there have been quite a few changes, and many of them affect many people that we are talking to and have clients from ExxonMobil. So let's talk about some of the recent changes that pertain to taking money out of your retirement account. Well, most of you know you're not supposed to take money out of a retirement account prior to 59.5, and if you do so, you're potentially going to be exposed to a 10% early withdrawal penalty. There are many ways around this, and especially working with ExxonMobil, your 401k plan is a great place to generate some penalty-free income if you decide to leave the company prior to 59.5 and need some money from your retirement accounts. So nothing has actually changed recently to this, but what has changed is the age at which the IRS will start forcing you to taking money out of your retirement account, your pension, your 401k, and IRAs, your qualified retirement accounts, pre-tax assets for the most part, because the government wants to start collecting taxes on these dollars. Originally, this was 70.5. They changed that a couple of years ago to be age 72. The end of 2022, they changed this to now 73 is the required beginning date, or the age at which you have to start taking money out of your accounts. There's an exception if you are still working. You do not have to take money out of your 401k if you are still working at ExxonMobil past age 73. And this is actually going to change again to age 75 in about 10 years. So lots of moving parts here, and just important to make sure that you're following the guidelines as far as timing, because the penalties are rather severe, although they have come down a little bit, and we'll talk about that change in just a moment. Something else that changed fairly recently is how non-spouse beneficiaries have to take money out and pay taxes on inherited retirement accounts. Now, nothing has changed to spousal IRAs. So inherited retirement accounts for spouses, the spouse still has the option, not the obligation, but the option to roll over their deceased spouse's retirement plan into their own IRA, which in many cases is beneficial in an effort to stretch out the distributions over a longer period of time. In other words, stretch out the taxes over a longer period of time and have more flexibility in managing your tax bracket. This is no longer the case for non-spouse beneficiaries. So usually children, but not always. Non-spouse beneficiaries are going to have to remove all of the money from an inherited retirement account, such as an IRA, a 401k, a pension that has a lump sum option, within 10 years of the death of the original account owner. Now, it doesn't matter if you take 10% a year out for 10 years, you could take it all out right away, you could take it all out in year 10. They don't care the rate at which you take the money out. You just have to take all of the money out by the 10th year. Otherwise, there are very severe penalties for these required distributions for non-spouse beneficiaries. And typically, we'll work with our clients. I unfortunately had a client pass just a couple months ago. We have to work with certainly the spouse, but definitely the kids as well, if they are primary or contingent beneficiaries on the account, to make sure they're being tax efficient with these distributions. And it helps for us to know about your income, your potential future tax bracket and taxable income, so we can structure these distributions efficiently to minimize the total taxes you pay on this account, not just this year's taxes that you might have to pay on these required distributions. Now, we talked about this earlier just briefly, but there are no longer age restrictions on contributions to an IRA. One caveat is that you have to have earned income to make a contribution into an individual retirement account. And there are limits on how much you can put into a traditional IRA as well as a Roth IRA, but you do have to have earned income. You just now no longer have an age restriction. And if you're still working past 70 and a half, there could be some arguments to be made to continue funding these types of accounts for potential future tax benefits. Now, we've brought up both last year's tax brackets as well as this year's tax brackets on both ordinary income tables and capital gains and qualified dividend tables. So I'm going to zoom in just briefly to look at last year's ordinary income rates. Nothing has changed in 2023 as far as the rates, but what has changed is these thresholds in terms of how much income you can earn before you go into a higher tax bracket. Oftentimes we hear misconceptions from our clients thinking that if their income, let's say, for instance, you're filing a joint return as a married couple, and you can see here the 24% tax bracket ends at $340,100. We hear a common misconception that somebody said, if I make $1 over, or if my adjusted gross income is $1 over this $340,100, all of my income is going to be taxed at that next bracket, 32%. And that is not the case. It's a progressive tax system where the first amount of your income is taxed at 10%, then 12%, then 22%, then 24%, and then maybe 32% in this case. And you'll have an effective tax rate, which is the weighted average of all of these tax brackets. So it's not the end of the world if you go into a higher tax bracket, but every extra dollar you earn will be taxed at that higher rate in that situation. And then we also don't have changes to the tax rates on the long-term capital gain side. Keep in mind, a short-term capital gain, that's when you sell something for more than you bought it for. realize a capital gain within 1 year, those will take you up to these higher ordinary income tax rates. And also needs to be considered when you're making decisions in non-qualified investment accounts, non-retirement accounts, about when you're buying and selling assets, and also what is the source of your income in retirement. And it helps to have different types of accounts so you can be strategic about where you're taking money out of, not just from an investment perspective, but also from a tax perspective. 2023, we have a little bit higher thresholds. You can earn a little bit more income and stay in this tax rate or tax bracket that we saw earlier. Standard deductions have also increased. And we also have some increases to the thresholds on the long-term capital gains tax rates. And keep in mind, many of our clients, we're not going to go into great detail on this strategy today, but there's a great tax strategy for many people that we work with at ExxonMobil that have appreciated ExxonMobil stock, known as net unrealized appreciation. Most people have heard that term before and know at least a little bit about it, but it's a fairly complex strategy that if it applies to you and if you qualify for some tax savings through this, you've got to start wrapping your head around how this works and preparing for the possibility of a tax burden associated with this strategy, because there are some detriments to this strategy. And one of the reasons it doesn't work for everybody, but many people we talk to at ExxonMobil have more benefits than detriments by correctly implementing this strategy. And that's something we'd also want to talk to you about and work with you on as you approach your transition from ExxonMobil. Oh, I love this slide. Turns out, as many of you know, every state taxes income differently. This is in addition to federal income taxes. We've highlighted these in different colors here, but the white states don't have any income tax. The dark blue states have the highest rates, where the top rate is actually higher than 8%. And as it turns out, it's not shown on here. You can see there's 8 states that are in white that have no state income tax whatsoever. There are also an additional 5 states that do not tax your retirement income, any form of retirement income, including withdrawals from an IRA. And so these are important considerations, we believe, when picking where you're going to be in retirement. A lot of our clients in retirement, they will move closer to their kids or grandkids, or maybe move farther away from their kids, or downsize, move out of the city, move to a cheaper state to live in. And in this case, move to a state that is going to tax your income less or maybe not at all. Very worthwhile consideration for somebody approaching retirement. And we can run a comparison on your cash flow analysis. Pretty powerful when we see how much longer our money lasts by avoiding paying, and in many cases, unnecessary tax to a state that you might not even care that much to live in. Now, Secure Act 2.0, this was signed at the end of 2022. So let's go through some of these changes that affect retirement accounts and many of our folks at ExxonMobil. So we talked about the later required minimum distribution age. That is now at age 73. It's changing to 75 in about 10 years. They have reduced they call it excise tax, or the penalty tax on an RMD that was not taken. So if you don't take the required minimum distribution, whatever age you fall into, that has gone down to 25% or 10%, depending on whether you correct the mistake or not. So that has been helpful. Hopefully you don't ever even run into this. And if you're working with a good retirement income advisory firm, they're not going to let you do this, hopefully. But now at least the penalties are less stiff for those that get caught up in that. There are no RMDs for Roth 401ks anymore. Oddly, there used to be, whereas there has never been RMDs for Roth IRAs. Don't get the two confused. Roth IRAs and Roth 401ks have different rules. But now at least there's no RMDs for the Roth 401ks for folks that leave ExxonMobil but happen to leave their 401k plan with Voya. There are higher limits and looser restrictions on QCDs, qualified charitable distributions. This is where you are effectively, rather than taking money out of your IRA by force because you have required minimum distributions, you are sending that to a cause that's important to you, a charity or 501c3, and not having to pay tax, and not having that income go to your taxable income. although you still have to give the money up and would truly have to be charitably inclined for that to make any sense for you. Higher catch-up contributions, those increased dramatically this last year. Matching contributions are now allowable to Roth 401k accounts. There's now more flexibility for part-time employees to be able to participate in retirement plans like 401k plans. There's now this website that's Retirement Savings Lost and Found. Affects a lot of people that moved throughout many jobs throughout their career to track down your various plans that might be floating around out there. We can now do 529 to Roth IRA conversions. There are limits to this, however, so you can't convert in many cases all of the 529 account that you didn't end up using for qualified education expenses to a Roth IRA. There are some limits, but very effective for folks that, like many of our clients, that saved for their grandchildren's education and the grandkids didn't end up going to college or didn't go to private school. This is maybe a good alternative for them. And now it's also allowed to have companies matching contributions just like they do with 401k plans, but to paying off student debt. Interesting change as part of the 2.0 Secure Act. All right, let's talk about some IRA tax planning and distribution strategies. So first, before we get into that, we definitely want to make mention of the most recently available interest rates that affect your pension plan, specifically the lump sum payout on the ExxonMobil plan. So what we're looking at here in this table for 2023, the most recently available data is actually through May. However, we need to wait for June's interest rates to be published so that we can predict what the fourth quarter interest rates will be for lump sum recipients. And it is not clear yet which direction they will be going. Once they publish those rates, typically the third week in July, we will have the data for June and May, and now can calculate what your lump sum will be in the fourth quarter for purposes of comparing that to the third quarter and maybe leaving the company based on this information to avoid losses on your lump sum, or continuing to work and not being too worried about it if we see that rates have stayed flat or gone down. But we will look at March and February. Remember, those predict the third quarter interest rates. So you see on this table, the third row says Q3 2023 blended rates. That's just an average of the March and February corporate bond interest rates. You can see also off to the right, we have grandfathered rates, which very few employees anymore qualify for these grandfathered, what is the 30-year Treasury interest rate. It looks like those rates may be going up. We don't have all the data we need to project this, but those may be going back up to 3.75% in the fourth quarter. So stay tuned in our next webinar. We will have good data for this to be able to say whether rates are going up or down and whether your pension lump sum is going up or down as a result. But it's amazing. You look toward the bottom of this table, you can see where rates were in quarter one of 2022. Do me a favor and look at this second segment rate column, because the second segment rate carries by far the most weight of these three segment rates. For instance, it's 3 times more relevant in the calculation than the first segment rate. That was 2.53 in the beginning of 22. That has now gone up to 5.16. That's an increase of more than 2.5%. And for those of you that have watched our webinars, you know that that's roughly a 25% drop in lump sum pensions because of this 2.5% increase to rates. And that, of course, is a function of your age, but on average, it's about a 10% drop in lump sums for every 1% increase in rates. And for folks that have worked at ExxonMobil a long time, this could mean hundreds of thousands of dollars, and in some cases over $1 million to some people that we work with, which can decimate a retirement plan. So we've got to pay close attention to this. If you're somebody who's inclined to be considering any portion of your pension as a lump sum, many of you know you could take your pension as a hybrid, partial lump sum, partial annuity. And this also has become more popular in an age where people in many cases are attracted to both lifetime income as well as the flexibility that the lump sum offers. And we would want to compare different options when making a decision on this, when we run this cash flow analysis, to look at all the merits of the various annuity options, the full lump sum, and maybe consider one of these hybrid options. But quarterly, these interest rates are changing, and quarterly, your lump sum is going to fluctuate as a result of these changes. So pay close attention to this, and we'll continue to update you as these changes come our way. So let's talk about some retirement income planning and distribution strategies. Most of you know when you leave the company, you do not have to do anything right away with your 401k plan. And in fact, if you're not yet 65, you don't have to do anything with your pension either. Now, most people realize that quicker that you get your money, whether you're taking an annuity or a lump sum, typically the better off you're going to be, whether because you can invest that money sooner in the lump sum case or you just get more paychecks on the annuity case. One exception to that is if you are not yet 60 years old, you may want to consider deferring electing your pension until at least age 60, because there are age penalties on the pension that go away even after you leave the company. For instance, I have a client that's retiring next month, and he is just turning 55. He's leaving as soon as he gets his eligibility at age 55. What we are doing for the next potentially 5 years until he turns 60 is going to review the interest rates every quarter. And if they are going up substantially, we may recommend he take his pension to avoid those losses. Although if they're staying relatively flat or, in better case, going down, he's going to be making money on his pension just because he's getting closer to age 60, even though he's already left the company. So most people, when they do take their pension, they will roll that money over if they take the lump sum either into an IRA, a traditional IRA, or into their 401k. The reason many people like the IRAs is because there are no limits on how you can invest the money. You have complete flexibility, and whether you're buying CDs or money market, stocks, bonds, real estate, annuities, mutual funds, ETFs, you could buy pretty much anything you can imagine investing in an IRA, whereas many of you know your options to invest are very limited in the 401k plan. There also may be some tax benefits when doing these rollovers. We talked about NUA briefly. Converting after-tax money to a Roth IRA might be another reason to do a rollover to an IRA rather than the 401k. But there also may be advantages to keeping your money in the 401k that need to be addressed and discussed that we would definitely have a detailed conversation on before making any recommendations, and everybody's situation is different on this. Once you roll this money over into the individual retirement account, it is not taxed. There is one exception to this. If you are what the IRS considers a highly compensated employee, it's likely you will have both a supplemental savings plan, which is at Voya, and a supplemental pension plan, which is shown on your pension projection. These values, these buckets, are taxable at ordinary income rates the year that you leave the company. So for instance, you may have, they call it a non-qualified portion of your pension, an amount that you cannot roll over. You'll just have to take that money and either put it in your checking and savings account. You can put it in a non-qualified brokerage account to invest the money, but you've got to pay taxes on that money. And it may be a reason to consider a different retirement date so that that money gets taxed in a more favorable tax year. When you have after-tax money in the 401k, we also call these spillover contributions. In most cases, it makes sense to move that money to a Roth IRA after you leave the company. You may also use those funds to pay down your cost basis if you're doing the NUA strategy. And this is going to be also evaluated on a case-by-case basis. We need to make some assumptions to figure out what assumptions about the future growth on your investments and tax brackets to figure out what's going to be the best strategy for you. But we've got to run that cash flow analysis first to understand more about your tax situation before making recommendations. You also may consider doing an after-tax contribution. They also call it a special contribution into your 401k, or you write a check to your 401k plan to Voya toward the end of the year. I think you have to do it before the second week in December. Otherwise, they cut you off. This just gets you up to the annual contribution limit, which is $73,500 this year for somebody who's over age 50. Surprise to a lot of people, you can put that much money in your 401k on a given year, but you also have to be cognizant of the ExxonMobil plan rule that says you can only put 20% of your pay into the plan plus catch-up contributions if you qualify for them. So a lot of moving parts, a lot of rules here that you need to be aware of to really get the most out of this plan. And there's some great tax efficiency strategies related to this. We want to maximize, and many of them go away once you leave the company. So let's take advantage of them now. Now, when taking money out of retirement accounts, there's different schools of thought, and our school of thought has improved over the years as the tax code has changed and we've had more flexibility with different types of accounts. The old wisdom, the conventional wisdom, and what many advisors might recommend you do in terms of withdrawing money from your retirement accounts is a strategy that takes out, and I'm going to zoom in here, your taxable dollars. This is your non-qualified money, money that's in the bank account, checking and savings, joint account with your spouse. Any non-retirement account, we call that taxable because it's taxed every year on your interest, dividends, and realized capital gains. Old wisdom said that let's spend that money first and enjoy tax deferral and tax exemption on the IRA and Roth IRA money. And you can see we did an example here. This individual or couple potentially retired at 65. They spent down their taxable money pretty quickly before year 2. Then they moved on to their tax deferred money and then spent their tax exempt money, also known as a Roth IRA money, last. That's the old school of thought, antiquated, not ideal in almost all cases. And I'm going to show you why. This individual or couple, total taxes paid $36,402 over their lifetime by utilizing this strategy. Now, we have what we call a tax-informed distribution strategy. And what this says is that we want to actually be cognizant of your tax brackets. We don't want to spend all your taxable money right away necessarily because that money is really valuable to you. We might want to preserve that money for longer so that we can stay in a low tax bracket for longer. And this is a great incentive for people to save money, not just in your 401k while you're working, but in non-qualified accounts. Open up a brokerage account with any number of custodians. We use Schwab, by the way, Charles Schwab, for our clients and those of you that do business with us. You can open an IRA, Roth IRA, and or brokerage account and have flexibility on the types of accounts you have to do more tax efficient and strategic planning for your future distribution strategy. You can see this individual, they spent some of their IRA money, their 401k, IRA, or tax deferred money in years 1 and 2, which allowed them to preserve their taxable, their non-qualified money for several extra years. And then they supplemented their tax deferred withdrawals over the course of their life with withdrawals from their Roth IRA. And this kept them out of that higher tax bracket. This is where the benefit of this strategy lies. In this case, this individual had 2 extra years of income. That's pretty powerful in a retirement plan to have 2 years worth of income. And don't forget either, the advantage or the benefit of a tax savings today, when compounded over 25, 30 years, the rest of your life after you retire, might be worth triple what the tax advantage was today because those tax savings can be earning interest for many, many years. So don't discount what a tax savings today can do for the long run of your retirement plan. So just to summarize, tax-informed distribution strategy. Step 1, fill up the lower tax brackets with tax-deferred income. Those are withdrawals from your IRA, your 401k that do go toward your ordinary income for the year. Just don't take out too large a withdrawal so you can stay in a relatively low tax bracket. We have many clients who have several $1 million in their retirement accounts and are still in the 12% tax bracket because we're strategically utilizing a tax-informed distribution strategy like the one we just mentioned. You've got to be aware that Social Security is partially taxable. It's not fully taxable, but in some cases, an incentive to take Social Security as an effort to have that become one of your income sources and reduce your total effective tax rate. And then ultimately strategically utilize the Roth or the tax exempt monies to manage your tax bracket and maybe even consider some Roth conversions in those low income years, those low tax bracket years, so you can protect your money from both state and federal governments in a relatively cheap environment when you're in a low tax bracket. This is especially important for those of you, including myself, that think that tax rates will likely go up over the next 30 years. Now might be a good time to pay some of the taxes on your otherwise taxable assets in the future, and Roth conversions could be a great way to do that. Now let's go through some of these special situations when taking money out of a retirement account prior to 59 and a half, you are going to have to pay a 10% early withdrawal penalty unless you fall under one of these special exemptions. So we've got medical expenses. Many medical expenses can make an exception for withdrawals from a retirement account prior to 59 and a half and that 10% penalty. Health insurance costs, disability is a situation where you can take penalty-free withdrawals before 59 and a half. Inherited IRAs, we talked about inherited IRAs have requirements on how soon you have to take the money out, but you can take the money out all at once if you wanted to, and that money is not subject to early withdrawal penalties. They are subject, unfortunately, to late withdrawal penalties like we talked about, but that could be a source of income for somebody that's not yet 59 and a half. They have these qualified higher education expenses that do meet the requirement for penalty-free withdrawals from a retirement account. First-time home purchase, the limits are relatively low, but this could also be a source of income on a penalty-free basis. Qualified reservist distributions, also penalty-free. Childbirth expenses, IRS 415 limits, that's what we talked about with the supplemental pension plan and the supplemental 401k or supplemental savings plan at ExxonMobil. Those fall under IRS 415 rules, and that's the reason you're having to pay taxes on some of that money. However, those aren't exposed to the 10% early withdrawal penalty if you have those. And then net unrealized appreciation, also a way that you can avoid the 10% early withdrawal penalty if you qualify and aren't yet 59 and a half. Now, between the ages of 59 and a half and now 73, you can take as much or as little money out of your retirement account as you want. It will still be taxable at least the federal rate and potentially state rate, depending on where you live, where you reside in retirement or when you're taking this money out. And then once you turn now 73, what will be 75 in a few years, then you've got to start taking money out of your retirement account. And the rate at which that happens is a function of your age. It starts at about close to 4% of all of your retirement accounts. The IRS doesn't care which account you take it from. You could take that money out of a combination of all your IRAs. You could take it all out of one IRA. You just have to satisfy the requirement based on the total value of all of your retirement accounts, traditional IRAs and 401ks that are exposed to this requirement. And the penalty, like we talked about, used to be 50%. Now it's dropped a little bit, still unnecessary. So just make sure that you're paying attention to these timeframes. Unfortunately, a statistic that we talk about at every one of our seminars, 74% of Americans over the age of 50 statistically don't have a written plan for their retirement. And there's just no reason for this, folks. There's plenty of companies, including ours, including the retirement group, that will do this for you on a complimentary basis, completely for free, as long as you're willing to spend a few minutes with us. All we ask, there's no expectation you do business with us to have us put this plan together for you. All we ask is if you get some value in the conversation, help us grow our business by referring us to a few of your other coworkers at ExxonMobil, and we will greatly appreciate that. If you'd like to get in touch with us, if you have specific questions, would like to set up a meeting with myself or any of my colleagues that understand the ExxonMobil benefits plans, you can reach out to us at 800-900-5867. You can also email us at info@theretirementgroup.com. You can even take a picture of this QR code in the bottom left here with a smartphone. It'll take you to a website to schedule a meeting, even if it's just to talk about some minor questions or major questions related to your retirement options. And then again, here's the LinkedIn page QR code where you can get access to our recorded videos that we've done over the years that we think are relevant to ExxonMobil folks approaching retirement. So with that, we do have some time for questions. So if we had any, Sam, I'm going to pass it back to you to ask any questions that came up on today's webinar. We'll try to get to them all.
Yes, Tyson, we actually had some really, really great questions.
Okay.
The first is, how long do you have to repay the CARES Act 401k loan that I took out in 2020?
Yes, 3 years. So what that is, for clarification, in 2020, they allowed for what normally is only a 60-day loan option from your IRA, where you can take money from an IRA or 401k. And as long as you put it back in within 60 days, it's not taxable. Now, that's always a rule, but in 2020, because of some pandemic concerns, they allowed an extension on that, or a CARES Act distribution, where you could have taken money out and you actually had 3 years from the date of the distribution to get that money back in the account. Otherwise, it's taxable. Hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you. Number 2, how can I leverage NUA in order to save on taxes when dealing with company stock in my 401k?
Yeah, good question. You may not be able to. This doesn't affect everybody. Not everybody qualifies this or will save money by doing NUA. So I would first suggest you watch our webinar on net unrealized appreciation specific to the ExxonMobil plan. I'd encourage you to call in to schedule a meeting with somebody that can walk you through first identifying if this is even something you need to worry about wrapping your head around. But logistically, the way it works is first you look at your last couple pages of your Voya 401k statement. It's a table called the stock cost basis by dollar range. It's going to show you all the shares that you bought throughout your career, the cost of those shares. And if they have some relatively low cost, I would argue that anything below 60 could be construed as low enough cost basis to potentially justify this net unrealized appreciation strategy. The benefit of this is that you don't have to pay ordinary income taxes on the appreciation of these shares. You have to pay long-term capital gains tax rates in almost all cases. In some cases, it might be short-term, but most likely not, which is a substantial saving for many people. For instance, I have a client, when we ran his NUA analysis, given the amount of company stock he had when he retired, his current tax bracket status, which he is in the 32% tax bracket, and the difference between ordinary income and capital gains tax rates, we're anticipating he saved over $200,000 in taxes because he did this strategy. That's not the case for everybody. As you give you an example why it's probably worth spending some time to understand and talk to somebody who has experience in helping somebody in your shoes trigger this distribution so that you don't get into tax trouble later, but also so you can enjoy the tax savings throughout your life. And especially if you don't sell those shares throughout their lifetime, the real tax savings come to the estate.
Thank you. Let's see. What is the process of using a Roth IRA with my 401k? Should I do it when working or when I'm retired?
Okay, so first let's clarify, Roth IRA is different than contributing to the Roth option in your 401k, or what's also called a Roth 401k. They are the same in that they are funded with after-tax dollars. The growth on these funds are tax-free as long as a couple requirements are met. You have to be 59 and a half, as well as have the account for 5 years to access the earnings penalty-free and tax-free. The cost basis is always tax-free, or what you put in that account is tax-free. Where the differences come in are in the limits on how much you can put into a Roth 401k. Roth 401k contribution limits are higher than Roth IRA limits. And there's just also some administrative differences. Like we talked about one that changed this year. Roth 401ks used to have RMDs, now they do not. The question though, I think the nature of the question was, how do I contribute to the Roth 401k? Does it make sense? Maybe. There are limits, like we talked about, depending on your age, whether you're under or over the age of 50 is going to define how much you can put into the Roth environment in your 401k. And the contribution limits are higher than the Roth IRA, so that is a big benefit to people that are still working at ExxonMobil. And in fact, you may even want to consider contributing on an after-tax basis if you hit the Roth annual limit, so as to be able to get more money in the Roth environment. Because what a lot of people don't realize is you can actually do an after-tax rollover to a Roth IRA from your 401k. This, by the way, is one way that many of our retired clients started a relationship with myself and our company, by having us help them move after-tax money in their 401k outside of the plan into a Roth IRA so that they could enjoy tax-free growth, as well as have access to more investment options. Then this is still while they're working at the company. They don't have to wait till they retire. This is what's called an in-service rollover. So it's going to really come down to where your tax bracket is today compared to where you expect it to be tomorrow. And by tomorrow, I mean years in the future in retirement. The problem with that is that not only is it hard to predict what your income is going to be in retirement, it's even harder to predict what politicians are going to do to our tax rates in the future. Although if you're like me and expect and am concerned about tax rates going up in the future, it could make some sense to put money in the Roth environment now so that you protect more of your money from the risk of tax rates being higher in the future. So again, we need to run a cash flow analysis. Call us so we can get to know your situation a little bit more and hopefully add some food for thought into this decision on whether to go pre-tax, Roth, or after tax on your contributions into your 401k plan.
Alrighty, I think we have time for one more. I just want to remind everybody, if we don't get to your question today, please click the link and book an appointment with Tyson and he can answer your questions at another date. Tyson, this one's a really good one. Are there any tax benefits to gifting my IRA to a charity?
Yes, in fact, there are many potential tax benefits. So gifting your IRA to a charity, well, I'll kind of break this down a little bit because there's a couple, well, I would say three main ones that we run into with our clients who are charitably inclined. You have to be charitably inclined for this to make sense to you because you're going to end up giving up more money than you're earning in the tax benefit. But for those that are charitably inclined, which for most of you, your church will be included in this. Your church, in many cases, might be considered a 501c3 and qualify for this. Those, especially, I have many clients that they tithe, they contribute money to their church on an annual basis anyway, and there could be a way to get a tax benefit out of that you want to be aware of. So the three that come to mind first, putting money from your IRA into a charity and getting a tax benefit. One is called a qualified charitable distribution, a QCD. This is where you directly send money from your IRA to a charity or a 501c3, and you get a immediate dollar for dollar tax benefit or tax deduction on what you contributed. Now, it is limited to $100,000 per year. And my understanding is that this is going to now be indexed for inflation going forward, so that will likely grow. But what that allows you to do for those of you that are over the age of 70 and a half, which is technically the rule, and especially for those of you that are already RMD age, you're now 73, you can actually use this as part of your required minimum distribution. So if you didn't need this money and you were going to give money to charity anyway, this is a great option for you to reduce your total income for the year, your total taxable income, give some money to a charity up to $100,000, and satisfy the required distribution for that year. Second option, which is a very new one, and this is an option that almost seems too good to be true, is that they have what's called charitable gift annuity. A charitable gift annuity, and this came out at the end of 2022, is where you can give up to $50,000, and this is a lifetime limit, not an annual limit, but a lifetime limit of $50,000 to a charity. Not only do you get the tax benefit from giving the money to the charity, but you also get that money back, or at least some of that money back, through an annuity. That charity is going to continue, they're going to collect the money from you when you give the money to them and take the tax benefit that year. But then there's going to be a calculation dependent on your age that you can start collecting money. And it might not be a needle mover, it might only be a couple $100s a month. But you're actually getting money back after you give money to a charity, which is a very rare situation. And again, this is new. Again, there is a caveat that it's up to $50,000 lifetime, but pretty surprising, pretty unique situation that has came out of this Secure Act 2.0 that was recently signed into Congress. The third one that I want to bring up, this is not necessarily moving money from an IRA to a charity, but it's a strategy that we use with clients through Schwab Charitable, known as a donor advised fund. This is where you will put money into a fund that you are the advisor on. So this is no longer your money, and that's why you can get the tax benefit from gifting this money to a fund that you now manage the investments on, as well as manage the distributions on. And by manage, I mean you get to pick when and how much money is going out of this fund to your church, to university, to a cause that's important to you, and you don't have to give all the money away this year. For instance, we have a client that I believe she put in $100,000 into a donor advised fund. This was a few years ago. but she didn't have any causes that were important to her, or at least that she wanted to give to yet. She did have causes that are important to her, but she had other money that was earmarked for going to them. And for 5 years, or I think it's been even longer than that now, that money has grown. We've invested in, for the most part, stocks, because she knew she wasn't going to give that money away for a while. So her time horizon was longer. And that donor advised fund has grown pretty substantially. The biggest benefit, though, of this is that you get an immediate tax benefit for money that you might not give away for years in the future, or you might be giving away a little bit each year. And this is especially helpful for folks that have a really big tax burden the year they retire or the year after they retire, which is many of our clients from ExxonMobil, either because of a large NUA distribution that is taxable pretty close to the time that they retire, assuming they do their rollover pretty soon after they retire. And also for folks that have these supplemental benefits plans, the supplemental pension plan and the supplemental 401k or supplemental savings plan. Those are taxable as ordinary income. And we have many clients that have pretty large, both supplemental pension and supplemental savings plans that will throw them into a much higher tax bracket. And here's a way for people that were going to gift the money to charity over time anyway, to get the tax benefit now, the year where you get the most bang for your buck when you're in that high tax bracket, and then wait to give the money out in the future when you had planned on giving it to whoever or whatever institution you planned on giving it to. So hopefully that was a great question, by the way, whoever asked it. Hopefully that give you some ideas on ways that you can both give, which is a beautiful thing to be able to do, and get some tax benefit, which means you can even give more or just reduce your tax burden. So with that, I think we're out of time, Sam. So I want to thank everybody for joining our webinar series today. Thank you, Sam, for helping me host. Everybody have a wonderful and safe rest of your week here. Happy Independence Day to everybody. We hope to talk to you all very soon.
Thanks, Tyson.